Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I figured I'd continue the trend of sort of talking about ways I'd like to see Temtem improve. Now, as always, this criticism sort of comes from a place of love and respect for the game. Just like with Pokemon, when there was a lot of vocal people complaining about Pokemon Sword and Shield, it wasn't out of, toxicity or hatred. It was out of a genuine love for the franchise, at least for most. Now, to be honest, Temtem's been a blast for me so far, but there are some notable issues with the way Pansuns are currently earned in the game and how they're distributed. So in this video, I'd like to sort of go over how you get Pansuns, the problem with the game's item pricing, and how I think it can be improved, and how it likely will be improved upon future updates, depending on how Crema handles the whole situation. So for the newer players out there, Pansuns are extremely important in the endgame, as you're going to need a lot of them if you plan on breeding or buying perfect Tems over on the Discord. The main way to get Pansuns as of right now is to catch and release Temtem. Each Temtem has a different Pansun value based off of its capture rate and level, and you get a certain amount of Pansun when you release and then report to the free Tem clerk. The two most popular methods are as follows. The first one will have you using two Wimplumps, both with Cold Breeze, to freeze Magnuses and utilize their high capture ratio to catch them as fast as possible. Generally, people report getting around 8 to 10k per hour, depending on whether or not they spawn a lot of Mastion and how their luck sort of plays out when catching them. The other method is arguably a more popular one over at Kakamaceno, where you'll want to bring a Nidrasil and a Kinu, usually, and basically utilize Nidrasil's Tri-Apothecary to stack poison and try to capture the Wimplumps and Ukumas, and sometimes Schween. The method is not as good as Magmus if you're going for number of releases for the free Tem goals, but it is better in terms of how much money you get per Tem. Most people report getting anywhere from 10 to 15k per hour, depending on their luck with the spawns and captures. Now, the reason I'm taking the time to explain this is to provide context for how exactly grinding Pansun generally works and how much you'll earn from grinding and how much time. Now, let's move on to the game's item pricing. I'm gonna start with the more frivolous items and work my way up to the more important ones. So when we look at like Tem cards, for example, they seem to be priced rather cheap. They're only 15, which is fair, but the Tem card pluses are 80. It's not quite as good, but it's still an acceptable price, considering you probably won't need that many. Now, with the sense and healing items, they're not necessarily overpriced per se, in my opinion. I mean, the scents kind of suck. They don't last very long, but it's not a huge deal, especially when you don't really need them in the end game. The real problem with pricing, in my opinion, are the enhancer and weakener fruits, the breeding items, and the cosmetics. So let me just quickly get cosmetics out of the way. They're ridiculously overpriced. It shouldn't take you 4 to 5 hours to get enough Pansuns for one cosmetic piece that costs like 50k, especially with how basic a lot of them look. Especially considering you can make a 6SV Temtem for a little under that price and a 7SV Temtem for about 10k more. To me, it honestly doesn't make a lot of sense, other than that they're trying to keep people poor to drive up sales for the cosmetic when the microtransaction store comes. I'd honestly rather the cosmetics just be like League of Legends, where you have to pay real money, if it meant that they would make everything else in the game cheaper to not try to keep you poor. It almost feels as though everything else is so expensive so that you don't want to waste money on cosmetics. The fruits are also overpriced. If you want to max out a Temtem, it's going to cost you 500 per fruit, so about 26k in total, which granted, it saves you a lot of time, so I can understand the price, but the weakeners is where the issue lies. If you want to respec your Temtem and not fully undo all of their TVs, it's going to cost 750 for each fruit just to do a specific stat, which honestly, in my opinion, is way too expensive. They should just have a respec option like in Dark Souls for your Temtem. They already allow you to swap your moves around freely without making you pay, kind of like how Pokemon does with heart skills. So why not the TVs? If you've already went to the effort of training them and maxing out their TVs, you should be able to go somewhere to, sort of respread them. For those of you who are a little more competitively inclined, think about what happens when all the break points change upon the level cap increasing. You're going to have to change around how your Temtem is set up, because, maybe having one TV in special defense no longer hits a breakpoint for the next stat. So you might end up spending thousands respecking certain Temtem. As for breeding items, they were initially a lot cheaper back when the game first launched. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, something like 5 times cheaper. Now, Crema's reasoning for changing this was that people were getting perfect Tems too quickly, and that this is subject to change if people find it to be too much, but it never did change. Even if things go perfectly, it's going to cost you over 60k for a 7SV Temtem. So again, if you don't get gender locked at any point. So that's 5 to 6 hours of grinding, plus whatever grinding it takes you to get all of the one-statted Temtem, or if you decide to buy them, you can add time to Pansun farming. And if you get gender locked towards the end, you run the risk of either running out of fertility or eventually getting that 7SV, but you'll have to breed an extra 2 to 3 times at the end, which is going to end up costing you 10k each time. Now think about the Temtem Raber. It has an 85% male ratio, so getting gender locked on that one is essentially inevitable. One person on Discord told me that they spent over 200k just to get a perfect one. Since there are no ditto equivalent Temtem or no items that sort of guarantee the male species to pass over, Raber is definitely not even worth the trouble half the time. It's a very competitively viable Temtem in terms of its middle form Raise, and even Raishin or Raken, however you pronounce it, its final form with both abilities is pretty decent, but for 200k, you're better off looking for a breeder on Discord, and even then they're still expensive. Now, my suggestion is not to just make everything super cheap, but to scale down the prices a bit. A common argument against lowering prices of breeding items is that, well, you can just sell the 7SV ones you make, with the leftover furt, you can make some more and sell them. Now, honestly, that argument is a little bit nonsensical because if the price of breeding items go down, so will the price of the Temtem you're selling. It's basic economics. So you'd still be able to sell those Temtems that are left over, you just get less for them, but they would cost less to make. It would be proportional. Now, I want to sort of take a look at Crema's perspective on this and how the prices could potentially stay the same and money become a bit more easy to access in the future. But this all depends on whether or not they decide to make things even more expensive when the new islands come out. So basically, as the game gets larger, the endgame areas will have higher level Tems, therefore higher Pansun yields per release. I honestly think that's what Crema's mindset is, and if they have higher level Tems in the future, they'll give a much larger bounty, thus the prices could stay the same but essentially be cheaper. The issue I have with that though is that since the game is in fact out in early access, instead of having an abundance of grinding, just have the items cheaper and increase them proportionally as new updates come out. I'm not even saying to make them 5 times cheaper like they used to be, but if a single DNA strand is 600 and a compound one is 3000, that would still make the game a lot less tedious but not make it so it's so easy to get perfects. Especially when the first week or so of the game, the people who had already played through the alpha, sure, they had to restart too, but I'm sure it didn't take them very long to get to where they need to get to breed. So they have a bunch of perfect Temtem that they barely spent any money on because they were able to just rush through the game because they know what to do. Another method people might bring up is competitive battles. However, if you're not the best at the game, or even if you are and battles are taking particularly long, then you might not even be hitting that 10 to 15k per hour, so it's not even comparable to doing the releases. And this sort of leads into my final point of this video, and that's actually how Pansuns are earned. There's definitely a debate to be had about how long it should take to get a perfect 7SV Tem, especially since auto-scaling is a thing in competitive. However, I do think that there is a good middle ground to this debate. Now, let's not forget, TV training can take quite a while, and you might not want to take so much time to do it just on a crappy Temtem for auto-scaling purposes. So this sort of comes back to battles and why, even though it takes a lot longer to get Temtems, I'd rather grind battles than catching and releasing. I think the problem a lot of people have with Pansun farming might not even necessarily be the prices or how much you get. Though I'd like to see them cheaper, I wouldn't mind grinding for a few hours if it wasn't so monotonous. Grinding Pansun through free Tem feels like farming cows in RuneScape to get to level 99 in your attack. It gets really old really quick and isn't a big enough reward to feel like even going through that. When I'm battling competitive in the ladder, I feel like I'm actually playing the game and earning Pansun at the same time. It doesn't feel so frivolous. I think they really need more ways to earn Pansun that are viable. I hope when the 7th island comes out, where they'll have like a Battle Frontier-esque area, they'll make facilities that actually make it worth playing as a Pansun method. Because as of right now, competitive battles are not viable if you're trying to get as much Pansun as possible, not even close. They could add like dungeons of sorts, kind of like the Battle Pyramid, or add trainer battles like the Battle Tower that could give you a decent amount of Pansun. They could even have a facility that could focus on single battles for added fun. My point here is that it isn't necessarily about the amount of money, it's how you're earning it. When I started scripting this video, it was originally just going to be about how Pansun farming was frustrating and how the prices are too high, but as I got further and further into scripting it, I became more aware of Crema's side to this. So I guess the takeaway here is that there's sort of a middle ground to things. In Crema's defense, it is an early access title, and though the grinding is frivolous, there'll likely be much more paths in which you could take to getting Pansun, and hopefully the other methods other than releasing will actually be viable. They have stated that they want to have more methods, but because of the game being in early access, this is the way it is right now. But in the player's defense, the current grinding method is too stale, and perhaps item prices need to be adjusted until a point where grinding for Pansun can be enjoyable. With the whole in-game economy argument, you could say, well, only half the Temtem are available, and you know, like, if there are going to be grinding methods that are better or at least more enjoyable, that would change the economy anyway, to the point where the Temtem are going to be quicker to get. So it really, honestly, the economy argument only makes sense if you're about to make every Temtem like super easy to get, whereas I'm just looking at the enjoyable aspect. But I'm more curious to know what you guys think about this whole situation. Do you think Temtem is too grindy, not grindy enough, just right? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Monster Tamer content. Until next time, peace.